This is Duke University.
Welcome to one of our Karsh conversations sponsored by the Duke University Career Center, as well as Duke Alumni Engagement and Development. Tonight you're in for a treat. We are going to have a social media masterclass put on by one of our very own. Miss Audrey Fenske is an award-winning dancer and choreographer with degrees in developmental psychology and dance from Duke. She is a teacher, communicator, event and program manager, and champion of the arts. She currently works in marketing communications for Duke Alumni Engagement and Development and is also alumni of the Career Center. So you guys are in for a great treat this evening. I'm going to hand it over to Audrey. If you want to utilize the chat box for questions, I'll keep an eye on that. And then I'm sure we'll leave some time towards the end for questions as well. Audrey, all yours.
Sure. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm excited to talk to you all about social media. Like Nicole said, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to just pop them in the chat. I'll answer them as soon as I can, and then we'll definitely have time for questions at the end. Oh, as it will not let me go forward. Okay, we're going to do it manually here. So a little bit about myself. Nicole gave me such a lovely, glowing introduction, but I do currently manage all of the social media accounts for all of our Forever Duke presence online. That's all of the @Duke alumni accounts. So we are currently on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Before that, I worked in the Career Center. I worked in communications and events management. I come from a lifetime of working in the arts as a former professional dancer, a teacher, a choreographer, and then I spent about a decade working as an arts administrator for a 501c3 nonprofit dance company in school. So a little bit of everything there, and that's kind of where I got my start in communications and social media management. I am a Duke alumna, class of 2009. Fun fact is I was Duke's first dance major, so I actually graduated in a class by myself, which was really funny. And additional fun fact is I have danced on stage with Britney Spears, which I don't think a lot of people have. I enjoy that about myself. So I'm glad you all are here because we're going to chat about social media, which I'm sure you all are already experts in, as most people are these days. I'm sure you're using social media in some capacity, even if you think you aren't. There's some app that you open all the time and you're scrolling and you're looking through. And does that make you an expert? Yeah, absolutely it does. So what I'm here to do is help you leverage that expertise into a very professional presence for yourself. So you already know so much. It's time to leverage that. And what we're going to be talking about is really treating your social media as your personal brand. So before we even get into the social media aspect of it, I want you to take a moment and think, if you were going to start a social media account, what would it be about? Or what would your presence be online? And part of that is really knowing yourself, which of course is one of the steps in the career development process with the Career Center. It's the first step. So as you're thinking about yourself and maybe how you would like to present yourself online, think about what you enjoy doing. Think about what problems or issues you're interested in working on. Think about the skills that you most enjoy using. Think about what energizes you and what depletes you. And then think about how you might want to impact the world or society through your work. So some of those questions will help you, first of all, gain a much greater understanding of who you are and what you want to do. But it'll also help you start to find a direction for the brand that you want to present yourself as online. So definitely a tip, go to the Career Center and talk to a career advisor if you need help navigating any of these questions. I totally took all these questions directly from their website, so I know they have all the tools to help you there. So now, after you've thought about yourself and you start to think about, the impact that you want to have and maybe how you want to present yourself online, really start paying attention now as you're scrolling. So as you're looking through your phone, as you're taking those 5-10 minutes, maybe an hour at the end of the day and looking through Instagram, looking through Twitter, whatever it is, pay attention while you're scrolling. So I want you to pay attention to who you're following and try to think back to when you started following them and why it was that you were following them. So if it's a particular influencer or if it's somebody that's in the same field as you academically, think about why you started following them. What was that post that really grabbed your attention that made you click that follow button? Think about what grabs your attention now on your account. What's that post as you're scrolling that makes you stop and look at it and take that extra minute? And what are the posts that you just scroll on by? You don't need to take any time to look at. Think about what motivates you to interact with an account. If you're actually going to like a post, or if you're going to comment on it or share it or save it, what is it that compels you to do that? And then think about what's missing from your feed. What do you wish you could see more of on social media? Or what do you think, there's a little bit of this, but they could really dive deeper into this, or this account talks a lot about this thing, but I think I could talk about it a little bit more. And that's all going to guide you into creating that branding for yourself. So we're going to talk about branding now. So when we're talking about social media, we can all have, these personal accounts, these private accounts. But what I'm really addressing today is your public persona online. So this is the brand that you're presenting. You're presenting to the outside world. So maybe you want to go into academia and you want to have this really polished presence online and share articles that you come across that you really enjoy and share your own research. It's a very public persona. So that's really what I'm talking about here. So as you're thinking about branding yourself online, you have to almost think of yourself as a brand a little bit. So there's some branding elements that you can consider that will help make your appearance online appear really polished and professional. So number one is always check your employer's policies about social media. So you might have gone to like Twitter accounts or things like that and seen little disclaimers in people's bios that say, tweets are my own, or these tweets do not reflect my employer. Sometimes that's an actual, legal thing that your employer might require you to have in your bio. And then some employers' policies are even so strict that they might say, don't mention our company at all on your social media. So always check what your employer's policies are. Some have more robust policies than others, but it's good to really go through that and make sure that you're doing everything, because you don't want your employment to be affected at all by your social media account. So next, make sure your handle is something that's professional and means something to you and works for your brand. So for example, you could choose at Dr. Jane Joe instead of at Daydreams and Clouds 1999, unless that's your brand. Maybe your brand is you're creating perfumes and that works for your brand. Always make sure that handle though works for what you're doing. So I always think back, because I am an elder millennial, I always think back to AOL Instant Messenger, which was huge when I was in middle school and high school. And everybody had these ridiculous AOL Instant Messenger screen names. So I had to grab these tweets that had people's interesting 90s screen names. I really like the bottom one where it says, my screen name was Ardias Sports 99 because Ardias are my initials. I liked sports. And it was 1998 and 1999 seemed cool. So sometimes those handles can end up looking like those old dated AOL screen names. So you don't want that necessarily, unless it works for your brand. And then consider really branding yourself in terms of visually what people see when they come to your feed or come to your profile. So consider maybe a brand font or a color palette. If you go to, there's a website called brand.duke.edu, you can see how Duke has done all these things for themselves. So Duke has particular fonts that you have to use when you're doing things with that are marketing Duke activities or Duke events. And they even have their own color palette as well. So that's a very normal thing for brands to do. And that's absolutely something you can do for yourself too. And then if you're really creating a lot of content, you might also consider a logo, even if it's just a text treatment. So that's like taking the text, like just your name or just your handle or something like that, and making it look kind of fancy. That's okay to do too, but consider that if you're creating a lot of original content, because that can be a way, if people are sharing your content, to keep your brand kind of proliferating throughout the online world. So I grabbed a couple examples of some nice branding elements. This is, you all had to sign up for this event through Handshake. So I went to Handshake's Instagram. I really like that they have this very bold, colorful palette. Most of their stakeholders are college students. They're trying to get college students to engage. So it's very youthful looking, very exciting and bright and happy. And maybe if you're a tired college student, it will stand out to you. And then you can see that they have this consistent font choice for all of their graphics as well. And I love that even their Instagram highlight covers are in that bold kind of neon palette. It looks really good. And then this is Elise Brienne. She is actually a Duke alumna. She is a JD, so she graduated from the School of Law last spring, but she's not practicing law. She's currently running a design business where she does all of this beautiful art, and all of her wonderful creations are printed then onto stickers and journals and things like that. And she has done a wonderful job of branding herself online. I think even though she doesn't necessarily have a logo, she has a really compelling profile photo that's like an introduction to her, and you can see her work behind her, those stickers behind her. She has that link in the bio that's helpful for branding purposes as well. And then she has everything in this nice kind of warm peach, whites, pinks color palette that really matches the art that she does as well. So it's all kind of tied together. So when you see those things, you think of her brand. So now we're going to dive into content, which is definitely the heavy load of running a social media account. Like I said before, when you're thinking about creating content, think about when you're scrolling what's missing from your feed, and then think about ways that the content that you're making can stand out from accounts that are maybe covering the same topics or around the same areas. If you're comfortable in front of the camera, I definitely recommend diving into the short form video. So that's your TikToks and your Reels. If you feel ready and comfortable to be an influencer, there's certainly a market for that. A lot of the social media platforms are really trying to push short form video content, especially, of course, TikTok, but Meta, Instagram, and Facebook are really trying to chase on the coattails of TikTok. So they're really trying to push this short form video content too. So if you're comfortable doing that, I definitely would encourage experimenting with that and trying with that. But if you're not in front of comfortable in front of the camera, that's okay too. Information carousels and blogs and other forms of content can be really effective too. And honestly, on the Duke alumni Instagram, we still get some of our best engagement from what Instagram was made for, which was just beautiful photos and nice high quality images. So just because everyone is pushing video, don't necessarily feel like that's what you have to do too. Definitely reconsider formality. So you'll have to ask yourself with your brand and what you're representing exactly how formal you want to be, because depending on what you do, you might be more or less formal online. I would definitely say try to keep everything as authentic as possible, because authenticity is really rewarded on social media. So don't be afraid to let your hair down a little bit. You don't want to do an Instagram and feel like you're reading a press release for the news or something like that. You want to feel like it's fun. You want to feel like it's engaging. So think about that tone that you want to have in terms of formality. And then you don't always have to create new content. You can always think about how you're repurposing old content. So for example, we had this YouTube video on the Duke alumni YouTube, which is a conversation between Grant Hill and Coach John Shire. It was at Page Auditorium over the summer. It was really nice. It was a nice hour-long conversation. And it was great content. And we shared out that video, but I said, I really want to try to drive some more traffic to that YouTube video. So I took the YouTube video and I cut it down and I made a really short reel. I just used a short clip about Grant Hill talking about how, Duke basketball is kind of all over the world. And it's really only about a 20-second clip of him talking. And I turned that into a reel and posted it. And it did end up driving a lot more traffic to our YouTube video because people saw that. And people just enjoyed the reel just as a piece of content as is. It's a great quote that I had from him. And we ended up with about 28,000 views or a little bit more than that. It's still our highest viewed reel, and it's old content that I just repurposed. So don't be afraid to do that. It can definitely be helpful. And then consider what platform you're on and adjust accordingly. So you can't write a tweet and then expect that tweet to work on LinkedIn or expect that tweet to work on Facebook. You have to think about the platform you're on. Each platform engages really specific audiences. And so you want to be sure that you are engaging the right people in the right way. As you're planning out your content, sometimes this can seem really, really overwhelming. you don't really want to really fly by the seat of your pants. I don't recommend that, because then you're always in a rush. You're always scrambling to get a piece of content together, to get something up. And it's not always going to be your best work, right? It's the difference between, you know, writing the paper the night before it's due and like actually taking some time 2 weeks beforehand and planning it out and planning what you're going to write. So you should do the same thing with content. Plan it out a little bit. Plan it out as far advanced as you can, but definitely maintain some flexibility to jump on trends. So sometimes there's going to be a fun trend, there's going to be a fun meme or something like that that really fits with your brand and you really want to jump on. Have flexibility for that. You can definitely absolutely jump on something really fast. There was a trend on Twitter a couple months ago that was "she's a 10 but ... And I did not have content planned, but I saw it blowing up the day it happened. And I said, I have to jump on this today because it's not going to be cool tomorrow. It's not going to be funny tomorrow. So I asked my supervisor, hey, can I make a tweet with this? And he said, yes. So I did. She's a 10, but she went to UNC. And it worked. It's actually one of our highest performing tweets ever. And it was just completely unplanned. I threw it up there. So, but it worked. It had that high engagement because that was the funny thing for that day. Would not have worked the next day. Calendaring can be helpful as you're thinking about that content. Some people have these beautiful drawn out calendars. There's paid apps you can get for planning your content. I honestly use an Excel spreadsheet because I don't have the money to spend on anything extra fancy. And this is really all I need. I have the date, I have the topic, I have my copy that I write, the text of the post, I have a link if I need that, I have an image where it's going, and then any tags that I need to have. So there's a little example down there of my very fancy content calendar. Like I said before, don't be afraid to repurpose that content, share content from peers. Hopefully on your own account, you're following people that are in similar fields or saying similar things, and you can always reshare that content, retweet it, quote tweet it, add your own comments, share it on Facebook, add your own comments, anything that works like that. So one last reminder with content and kind of that flexibility piece that I was talking about, definitely be mindful of tone, especially when unexpected events happen. And in case of like huge world events or, you know, tumultuous times, things like that, be willing to silence your own account to allow space for others when appropriate. You know, sometimes there's national discourse and world discourse that's a little bit more important perhaps than what you're sharing and what you're talking about at that time. So don't be afraid to silence your account to give that space to others. And then in terms of being careful with tone, sometimes things happen and you might have a scheduled post, just double check it when a big, huge event happens. So the example most recently that happened was, this was a tweet that went up for Canada's Drag Race. Totally, you know, there's nothing wrong with it at all. It's Drag Race finale day. The crown's up for grabs. Who's going to take it home? But unfortunately, this tweet went out about 15 minutes after the announcement of Queen Elizabeth's death. So not the best tone necessarily, not the best timing for that. Of course, you know, you can't help these things sometimes, but check your tone, check what's going on in the world, make sure everything's going to be cool there. So now we're going to chat a little bit about your community, so your audience, your followers. So when I do, aside from my work with Duke alumni on their social media, I also do a little consulting with some friends and friends of friends that have brand social media accounts. And I kind of come in as they're, you know, thinking about pivoting their strategy or really honing in on a strategy for their social media platform. And the first thing that happens usually when I come in and do these meetings with them, like when I sit down to talk about social media with them, the first thing I discover is that they are always on every single platform. They have all the platforms plus a TikTok plus you know, so I've seen social media platforms that I didn't even know exist, and like I'll have friends and people that are on them. So you do not need to be on everything. Every platform requires a specific strategy. You can't just do a one size fits all for everything. So don't feel like you need to be on everything. Those brands and those accounts that you see that are on every platform, usually it's a team. It's an entire team of social media people running it. Or it's somebody like me that does social media full time and I can really devote every working hour I have to social media. That's probably not going to be what you're doing unless you're going into this as a field. You're probably doing something else amazing and fantastic, and social media is just one little portion of what you do. So don't feel like you need to be on everything. Build that following. So as you're creating these accounts, or as you're honing in on your strategy, start to find people to follow for follow, you know, people will follow you back, and start to think about ways that you can gather more followers and gather that audience. Think about where your audience or your community is. So think about what platform they're on. You know, are they all young college students? And you're probably looking at Instagram, you know, other populations, you're looking at other platforms. Think about where they are, and then think about where they could be in the future. So I always say, you know, don't sleep on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn can be really, really helpful, especially in a job search. If you can show that recruiter those blog posts that you've been doing on LinkedIn, if you have those links to things that you've been talking about, those articles you've been publishing with your extra comments on there on your LinkedIn, that can be really helpful in a job search. So think about where your future audience might be and who that future audience might be. And then try to utilize places where your community is already gathering to try to build followers. Some of the best places for that are LinkedIn groups, and then depending on what you're doing, Facebook groups as well. So groups will have a common interest, or they'll have something in common with each other. Maybe they all work in the same field as you. Maybe they all have the same degree as you. Maybe there's even, you know, a LinkedIn group for Duke alumni, which if you're not in, please join. Something that's like a common thread that you can then use that as an introduction, kind of a way to put your foot in the door and find those followers. This is, being social on social is my mantra. It's a thing I say all the time. It's something that's most important to me as a social media manager. I'm pretty sure it's how I got the job that I have now, because that was kind of what I came in with my shtick as what I wanted to do. But it's called social media for a reason. We got to be social. So as you're managing your account, dedicate time each week to being social. So liking, commenting, retweeting, or quote tweeting, sharing things. Have those interactions, have those moments where you're reaching out to other accounts. Find those folks that are doing similar work or making similar content with you, and start as just, you know, amplifying what they're doing, sharing, commenting, things like that. And then maybe you can build that relationship where you can have a future collaboration with them, which would be really cool. And then another fun thing to do with being social is using features that are already built into these platforms, such as polling your audience or asking questions. And it's a great way to get your followers to engage with you. It's a great way to, you know, they love to answer quiz questions, poll questions, things like that. But it's also a great way to see what they're thinking, how they're feeling. You can workshop content ideas, ask your followers, hey, would you rather see a blog or a podcast next week? You can make sure that you're providing the content that your audience wants to see with this. And then this is another big, huge thing. Don't be afraid to experiment with something new and different. So I've had content that I thought was amazing. I'm like, this is going to blow up. This is the best piece of content we've done in weeks. I think it's going to be amazing. And then I go and check and it has like 3 likes. And I'm always super frustrated. And then there's some posts that I'll have that I think, you know, I kind of threw it together last minute. I think it's corny and it blows up. So an example of that is I looked at the calendar and I saw that World Emoji Day was on this random day in July. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I didn't really have anything else to post that day. So I was like, I guess I'll do something fun with emojis. And I couldn't really think of it a good idea. So I just decided, hey, share your journey since graduating from Duke in emojis in our comments. And I thought it was super corny. I was like, well, I can just say that I did something. It ended up blowing up. Alumni loved it. They were so excited. And across the board, I threw it up on all of our platforms and we had engagement on every single platform. Especially our most popular platform was LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn alumni, you would not think that an emoji day post would really blow up on LinkedIn, but it did. Alumni loved it. And what I loved about that too is the journeys that they shared ranged from professional to personal. So this is one of our alums on Instagram, and they shared the story about going into veterinary medicine after graduation, which I thought was really fun. This is another one that we got on Instagram, and it's a journey of this alumna's personal coming out story. They're a trans woman, and they shared this story via emojis, which I thought was really, really great. And then we had alumni come back and comment a day later with more, a week later, actually, with more fun things. This alum did his story, then he came back and he was like, oh, I forgot to put falling in love prior to getting married. So that means I married a printer, which I thought was funny. So now we're going to dive into a few best practices. So these are other things that I recommend that are just great for being a social media manager in general. So accessibility. Everybody uses social media, but not everybody uses it in the same way. So you should always work to make your social media accounts accessible to everybody that might see it. So if somebody is using another tool to browse social media, like a screen reader or things like that, you want to make sure that what you're posting is able to be viewed and enjoyed by them. They're just as important as all of your other followers. A great way to ensure accessibility is to add captioning to video. So I don't know about you, but I scroll on my phone on silent most of the time, especially like maybe at work when I shouldn't be scrolling on my personal phone. It definitely should be on silent, right? So not only is adding captioning great for people that are scrolling on silent, it's also an accessibility thing, right? Because those captions enable whatever is being said in that video to actually be understood by everybody that's watching it. Most apps these days have a native way to add captioning to videos, so it's super easy to do. The technology is usually really great about getting everything. TikTok and CapCut, which is a app that you can use to edit TikTok videos, it'll even take out the filler words, the ums and the so's and things like that. It'll take those out automatically for you, which I think is great. So usually you can just caption it, read it through once to make sure there's not a weird word in there or anything like that, and post it. It's ready to go. Another way to ensure accessibility for what you're posting is to add alt text to images or to the caption of your post. So alt text is a description of what's going on in an image so that somebody that maybe has vision impairments or things like that can understand what's going on in that image. So I added an example here. This is from a tweet, and this is actually Twitter's example from their blog of great alt text. So it's that image description. It's an image of a coffee cup with a drink in it. And then the image description says a small white mug with a tiny loop handle and a shot of deep brown espresso and a light brown crema on top. The mug sits on a small white saucer on a medium brown wooden table. So it just is that description so that you know what's going on. This is especially important if you're sharing things like memes or things like that, because a lot of visual memes, the joke is lost if you can't see the picture. So you want to make sure that you have good alt text that explains if there's a joke in the image, explains what's going on. If there's something really important that might be missed, explains what that is. And then if you're designing things, so if you are a graphic design whiz or you're on Canva making fun carousels or fun graphics and things like that, check the accessibility of your font color against your background color. So I'm sure you've scrolled past a carousel or something like that on Instagram and been like, I can barely see these words. Like, why did they choose light blue text on a medium blue background? This is really hard to see. That's definitely an issue for anybody, but it's especially an issue for people that, you know, might need certain technology to read images and things like that, because they really can't access it if it's not visible or clearly visible. So there's great websites out there. I like WebAIM contrast checker, and all you have to do is put in the hex code for the color and of your font, and then the hex code for the color of your background, and it will immediately check and tell you whether or not that font color is accessible on that background color. Some other tips for being inclusive on social media. Like I said, everyone's using it. So it's good to write as well in a way that's inclusive to as much of your audience as possible. So when you're writing, consider removing gendered language. So for example, you can use first-year student instead of freshman. And then also consider writing in plain language if you're writing to a broad audience. Plain language is it's a language that's used by some press and other folks like that. And it's a way of making sure that the language that you're using is easy to read. It's very inclusive. The point of what you're reading is, you know, right there. People don't have to second guess it. There was a great article in the Duke Chronicle about the importance of plain language. And hopefully, Nicole, can I send these slides out after this event?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I will send these slides to you, and I have a link to that, but you can also Google Duke Chronicle plain language, and it's a great article that a student wrote about the importance of plain language, and they actually wrote the article itself in plain language, so you got that nice example of what it is. Definitely consider, if you're using stock images or things like that, consider diversity and inclusivity in those images. Think about what and who you're representing and making sure that it's, you know, expresses and represents all the wonderful followers that you have. I also linked in this slideshow a great article from Hootsuite that has even more suggestions about making your social media inclusive. They have tons of great suggestions. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you're working on your social media presence. And then don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions if you're unsure. We're all still learning, right? Nobody's an expert here. I'm certainly still learning. I'm sure you all are too. So don't be afraid to ask questions and continue to learn more. If the trolls find you, so if imagining in the future you have this amazing social media presence, you've really blown up, you have hundreds and thousands of followers, you have all these great people because you're doing such a good job because you've followed all these tips. Inevitably a troll is going to find you. Some post is going to grab the attention of somebody that's just spreading that negativity out there online, and they're going to come after you. And then often it's sort of can be a brigade of people coming after you. So if that happens, if you log on one day and you check your post and you see there's 30 new comments and they're awful, awful comments, first of all, breathe and know that this happens to literally everybody that has a great social media presence. So pat yourself on the back that you have gathered this much attention and garnered this much attention that it's maybe attracted not the attention that you want. So breathe, it happens. It's happened to all of us. Then don't be afraid, like I said, to reach out to experts for advice. So like I said, it's happened to all of us. Find other communicators, find other social media professionals. You can dig up this slideshow and find my email and email me. I would be happy to help you with this, even if it's just to vent. I have so many social media professionals that if something happens, I know that I can easily, DM them and vent to them and they understand. If they're on that piece of content of yours and they're making all these negative comments, pause for a second, because I know my first reaction is I'm so conflict avoidant that I'm like, oh God, I got to delete this. I got to get this piece of content out of here. And sometimes that can make the situation worse because then they're like, well, why did you delete that? Are you trying to silence me? It can end up making people even more angry. So while deleting that content or deleting their comments, even that might seem like the first reaction, like what you really want to do, but it's not necessarily the best step. So proceed with caution. Consider if you even need to respond. Sometimes some people, if you go and look at their account, this is all they do all day is they go on things and they write negative comments and they write mean things. And that's literally their life. So we just hope that their life gets a little happier. And maybe you don't even need to respond to them. So consider if it even warrants a response. Sometimes maybe it's an error that you made and you might want to say something. You might want to apologize. Like if you've missaid something or misphrased something, that might warrant an apology or, at least taking note of what happened. But sometimes you don't even need to respond. Remember, this will pass. People move on. They get angry at the next thing. So they will move on. And take some time for self-care. It's tough. It's tough and it can, hurt your little heart when those people are mean to you online. So do something offline that makes you happy. Practice a little wellness and self-care there. And then I want to talk a little bit about measuring success. So you want to make sure that you're doing a good job, right? You want to be able to say, hey, this has been successful. This content I'm sharing is successful. Only you can decide what success looks like to you. So that's not something you necessarily have to immediately decide upon as you're creating your social media presence, but definitely close to the beginning, start thinking about what success is going to look like for you. Maybe that's growing a huge following, or maybe that's getting a ton of people to comment on things, or maybe that's just feeling like I have a place for my voice and I have a place where I can share things. It's going to look different for everybody. So think about what it means to you. Now, analytics can be collected from every platform. The screenshot that I have here is we use a social media scheduling platform called Falcon in alumni engagement and development, and it helps us manage all of our social media accounts kind of in one place. So I can go and easily grab a lot of numbers from one place. And this is just one screenshot of one little section. But as you're gathering these numbers, it can be very easy to start obsessing with vanity numbers. So you can start obsessing over like, oh God, I gained 3 followers last week, but I lost 1 follower this week. So that's only 2 net followers over this week. Or this post had 3,862 reach, but my last post had 4,608. You can start really obsessing over numbers like that. That's not always helpful. So look for measurements that truly show how your content's performing with the audience that you want to reach. So the example I like to give is on our Instagram stories on Duke alumni, we have this thing that I started called Friday 5. So it's just a fun 5 snapshots of life at Duke that week. And I literally, like I said, repurposing content. I literally take these photos and this copy from other people's accounts. Like, hey, the ones I'm putting up tomorrow are like, hey, the majors fair happened. Hey, this artist talk happened. And when I look at just the vanity numbers, so if I look at just the reach and just the impressions, depending on what time of day I posted on Friday, some weeks I have great reach and great impressions, and then other weeks it's maybe not so great, depending on the time of day that I posted. And then sometimes that can vary too, if it's like a rainy day and people are staying inside and looking on their phones, or if it's the Friday before graduation, nobody's really looking at the Duke alumni Instagram. So things like that can affect those vanity numbers. What I instead look at is the click through to the next story. And that number is almost always consistent from the first to the 5th story. So what that tells me is the people that are tuning in and looking at that Friday 5, they're actually clicking through and looking at all 5 stories that I post. That's success to me. I want them to engage with all 5 of the stories, and I want them to look at them and enjoy them. So when I see that week after week, people are clicking through all the way to that 5th story consistently, that shows me that that content is successful. And then don't forget to measure qualitative feedback. Remember back in the beginning, I asked you to think about what is it that makes you want to engage with an account? What's going to make you want to comment on something? It's usually because it's really compelling stuff, or there's something that really sparked an interest with you and you feel compelled to comment on it. So keep those great comments that you get, keep those qualitative, interesting little tidbits of feedback that you get, because that can be more worthwhile than any number sometimes. Even if you have a great post and it only has a certain number of reach and you get 1 comment on it, but that comment is really just, you are amazing. I love this content. I love what you've been doing. Keep it up. It can be this great piece of feedback that makes you feel really good, but it's also a piece of feedback that you can say, hey, somebody liked this so much. They actually took the time to comment on this. So it can be really helpful. So I'm going to stop sharing really quickly because I want to show you all some examples of some really interesting public profiles that are out there. As I pull this up. So what I did was I tried to go through each social media platform, like the big guys, the big ones, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And I found some Duke folks or Duke adjacent folks that are on these platforms and are doing a great job on these platforms. So I wanted to show them off. So this is Dr. Chavis Jr. He is a Duke Divinity alum. They have a wonderful profile and biography of him on the Duke Divinity website. I definitely recommend you check it out. He was unjustly imprisoned for this big event that happened, and he actually started going for his divinity degree while he was in prison. He's really involved with a lot of social justice movements and things like that. So he's really a fascinating person. He comes back and talks fairly frequently at Duke. So I highly recommend looking into him if you haven't heard of him. So with Facebook, I'll be honest, engagement is low for pretty much everyone on Facebook right now. Facebook is very pay to play. They want you to buy that paid media, those paid posts. I am not super knowledgeable about that. That's definitely something where I'm still learning and I'm still, gathering knowledge on that for myself. But what I liked about his profile is that even though we're not seeing like a ton of engagement, he only has about 4,000 followers. That's still great. But I love that he has this, these really compelling videos that he shares. His copy is really, really short and easy to read. And it all fits in with the things that he's really interested in, these social justice causes, these causes that are really near and dear to his heart. And he shares these stories so that everybody, all of his followers can read it. He has a nice way of sharing, like I said before, sharing content that other people have posted. He shares that a lot with his own thoughts, which I think is really helpful. So moving along, I'm going to Instagram, and the Divinity School is just like really killing it on social media because Dr. Bowler is also a Divinity School faculty member. She's also a New York Times bestselling author. And she has a fantastic Instagram presence. I think a lot of it came from, she actually wrote a book and it became a New York Times bestseller. And the book is about her journey. She was diagnosed with cancer as a fairly young person. And the book is about her journey with that. So I love her social media account. She's very comfortable with short form video content. So she does a lot of videos. Of course, they're captioned, which is great. Accessibility, yay. Go Kate, that's awesome. And then she has these nice carousels as well. And you'll see that it's all branded with, a nice color, nice font. Everything, looks pretty neat and tidy. The font color on the background color looks accessible to me. So I'm going to assume that it's accessible. And I'm going to assume you can't always see the alt text, but I'm going to assume that she has alt text too. But yeah, it's very clear what she's talking about. She has this book out, so she has some really fun content around that book. I think she does a great job of leveraging the tools that Instagram has, and she has a great presence. And you can see that she gets great engagement, great numbers on all of her posts. So over here on Twitter, this is Dr. Eileen Chow. She's with Duke Asian Studies. I think she's a great example of academic Twitter. She really engages with a lot of Duke accounts, and she engages with a lot of accounts outside of Duke as well. She shares really interesting content, poetry, and things like that. She shares things. We get tagged with the Duke alumni account quite often with things that she's sharing. She shares other content that people are posting. I'm trying to find, oh, that's fun, like old Hollywood picture. There was even a talk that she did recently where she went back. Here it is. So she was listening in on a book talk and she tweeted about it. And there was a quote from it that reminded her of a tweet that she made back in 2019. So she actually ended up quote tweeting that old tweet of hers. So that's definitely reusing some old content, which is fantastic. So definitely recommend checking out her account as a great example of a Twitter account. And then Aaron Dinnan on TikTok, he is, if you want to really dive deep into social marketing and creating a, really strong social media presence for yourself, he actually teaches a whole class on it. I wish I was a student so I could go take this class because it sounds fascinating. But he has, I think, maybe the largest presence of a Duke faculty member on TikTok. Don't hold me to that, but I was collaborating with the staff member that manages all the Duke University institutional accounts, and we couldn't find anybody bigger. So I think this is the number one. And a lot of his TikTok videos, I'm not going to show them, but they're really, really fun. It's really a great insight into who he is as a teacher and a great insight into being a Duke student and a great insight into some of the things that he covers in his class. All of this is what my students think I do with the essays. And then what I actually do, he's going through it. He's being, he's working on it. So they're really, really fun videos. And, they have a ton of views on them. So he's done a really, really good job with his TikTok presence. So if you want to be an academic on TikTok, there's definitely room for that. And there's definitely, not a ton of great academic TikTok accounts. So there's definitely space for that if you want to be there. So that is really all I have today. I'm going to wrap up with that.